Welcome back to the garden. I'm Rachel and I garden here in a Zone 5B, just about a block off of Lake Michigan. Today we're going to be working on my bed that runs along the east side of the house. It's a very prominent spot for folks who are walking throughout the neighborhood. And we're going to start with our spring cleanup, but also doing some design edits. This bed has been established for a long time, but it just feels like there's something missing. So today we're going to solve that and add a few foundational plants, as well as regular old spring cleanup, edging, removing leaves, adding fertilizer, which is going to be the potash. And once we get those new plants in, move a few around, we will mulch, fix the irrigation for those new items, and add a couple of annuals, and that should be it. So the plan is to take spring chaos and make it feel much more intentional. So let's go ahead and get started. This is an already established bed, and there's a lot of plants in here that I really love. I have Bobo hydrangea that gives me really pretty summer structure, rudbeckia that brings in a lot of late season color, and some good evergreens that help this bed feel anchored even when everything else is still waking up. But the more I've watched this bed, the more I've realized that it needs a little more early season interest. I need earlier blooms, more color contrast, and a few stronger foliage moments before the hydrangea and the rudbeckia really start to take over. So the goal today is not to completely redo this bed, it's really to refine it. I'm adding plants with red and yellow foliage, plus a grass with more silvery blue hues. And I also realized that I really don't have enough grasses in my yard in general, and grasses add movement and texture the way that flowering plants just can't. So today is part cleanup, part maintenance, and part design adjustment. Before I can get to the fun part, I do need to do my spring cleanup. I do not do a big fall cleanup in my garden because I want to leave habitat for pollinators and beneficial insects. I leave leaves, stems, and plant material in place over winter because that space matters. And honestly, I've seen a huge increase in lightning bugs since I started gardening this way. They are one of those things that immediately makes me feel like a kid again when I see them in the yard. So I'm leaving the garden a little messy over the winter, help support that, then I'm okay with it. The trade-off is spring cleanup is definitely a bigger job. It can make the beginning of the season feel a little more rushed because instead of starting with a clean slate, I'm starting with leaves, old stems, edges that need to be cleaned up, and shrubs that need attention. But for me, I think it's worth it. I'm also trimming the rhododendron a little bit, nothing too dramatic, just cleaning it up, reshaping it so it looks a bit more intentional in the bed. And I'm doing this right after it bloomed, so that way I don't cut off any of the blooms for the next season. Then I'm edging. I use a half moon edger for this, and this is one of those tools that makes a huge difference really quickly. The clean edges instantly make a bed look more finished, even before you've added mulch or new plants. It's also helpful because this bed has expanded over time, and edging helps define where the garden ends and the lawn begins, especially in a bed like this where I'm trying to make the whole space feel more designed and that clean edge matters. This is not the glamorous part, but it is the part that makes everything look better. Now I'm moving these Maggie Daley astilbes. These plants have actually performed really well here. I don't want to move them because they're failing. I'm moving them because this bed has changed around them. As the arborvitae have gotten bigger and as I've extended this bed, these astilbes have started to get a little lost. They're still healthy, but you can't see their gorgeous pink blooms, and I really want to. So I want to bring them forward so that I can see them better and where they can actually contribute to the design of the bed. In the past, I've struggled with astilbe. I could get them in the ground, but they would never look as big and full as I wanted or have as many blooms as advertised. They also looked a little stressed, and I think that had a big part to do with watering. Getting them on drip irrigation and putting them in a more part sun location made a huge difference. They've always thrived. They've really thrived with more consistent moisture and the right amount of light. So because they're doing well, I don't want to move them and set them back too much. Taking my time here because I want to get as much of the root system as I can. And I'm also trying to think through the new placement before I just start digging holes. Because moving plants is one of those things where it's very easy to create a new problem while trying to solve the first one. My goal is to bring them forward enough to where they're visible and still keeping them in a spot where they will get the light and moisture that they like. This is also a good reminder that garden beds are never really finished. Plants grow, the light changes, and the size of your shrubs changes. And sometimes a plant that was placed perfectly 3 years ago suddenly makes no sense and in that spot anymore. It doesn't mean that the original choice was wrong. It just means that the garden is growing and the design needs to grow with it. I'm also adding in more potash to this bed based on my soil test results. This area is under 100 square feet, so I'm adding just about 2 pounds to this bed. I've already done a full video going through my soil test results and the recommendations, so I'm not going to go deep into that here. But this was one of the recommended amendments,
and I wanted to get that added before I mulched everything. So if you want more details on the soil test, I will link that video. Now we are getting to the really fun part. I found 3 plants that I feel like they're the perfect addition to this bed because they're solving the exact problems that I wanted to address. The first one is Little Devil Ninebark. This is a smaller Ninebark, so it stays around 4 by 4, so 4 feet tall, 4 feet wide, which makes a better size for this space. I love that it gives me that dark red foliage because this bed needs more foliage contrast. It also blooms in the spring, which helps with my goal of adding earlier interest to the bed. A lot of what I already have here really starts to shine later in the season. So giving something or adding something that gives me spring blooms and red foliage feels like a good design choice. The next one that we have is Pineapple Poprocks Spiraea. This one gets about 3 by 3, so also a very workable size for this bed. The foliage is lemony yellow color, and then it has pink flowers that bloom in early summer. So this gives me another early season bloomer, and it also gives me bright foliage moment, even when it's not flowering. And then there's another bonus of this one. It gets red foliage in the fall. So this is a full 3-season plant. I love plants that do more than one thing. If a plant can give me spring or summer flowers, interesting foliage, and changes for fall color, this plant is earning its spot. This is another part sun lover, which makes sense for this bed. And then my last addition is Maiden Grass. This looks super tiny right now, but she's not going to stay that way. This grass gets around 6 feet tall, and it has that silvery blue color that I think will be really pretty here. I'm using this partly for texture and partly for placement. I want it to cover up some of my infrastructure in this area and soften that part of the bed. I also think that the movement from the grass is going to be really nice. Now I'm updating my drip irrigation. Drip irrigation has been a lifesaver in my garden. It makes a huge difference, especially for new planting, because the plant gets consistent water where they need it. It also keeps the leaves dry, which helps avoid some fungal issues. Instead of spraying water all over the foliage, the water goes directly to the soil and roots. Every time I plant a new plant, I try to update the irrigation the same day, because if I tell myself I'm going to come back and do it later, I will absolutely forget and then wonder why the plants are struggling. So this is now part of my planting process. Plant it, water it in, and make sure the irrigation is already reaching it, especially with the Astilbe. I know now that consistent water made a huge difference, and so I want these new plants to be set up well from the beginning. Now I'm refreshing my mulch. I'm doing mulch across the garden this season. I usually do it every other year, and I'm aiming for about 1 to 2 inches thick. I'm not trying to bury my plants or pile it up against the stems. I just want enough to help moisture, suppress weeds, and make the bed look finished. This is always the part where everything finally starts to come together. Now that everything is planted, mulched, and cleaned up, let's do a quick scan from left to right. The bigger goal with this bed was to keep the plants that I already love, like the Bobos, the rudbeckia, the evergreens, and established perennials, and add more interest earlier in the season. So now we have that red foliage of the little devil ninebark, the bright yellow foliage and early summer flowers from the pineapple Poprocks Spiraea, and the silver blue texture of the Maiden Grass. I also moved the Maggie Daley astilbes forward so that they don't get lost behind the bigger plants. It's still early and everything needs time to settle in, but this already feels more intentional and has more contrast, more structure, and more texture than it did when we started. All right, so the front bed is refreshed. We have cleaned, we have edged, we've amended, we've moved plants, we've added new plants, tucked in a few annuals, updated the irrigation, and mulched everything in. It feels so much better already, and there's more to come as the season evolves. Thank you again for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you again next time. Thanks.